Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. Before we get started with this week's show, first off, let me take this opportunity to welcome back the regular listeners. And if this is your first time listening to the show, I hope you enjoy this episode and decide to subscribe to the show. And on today's show, I've got Dr. Rob Bell. Rob is a certified consultant of the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. He is a PGA Tour credential as a sport psychology consultant and has coached winners on the PGA nationwide and mini tours and caddied on tour. He is the author of 5 sports psychology books. Furthermore, he works with Indy 11 and the University of Notre Dame. His passion is helping others become the best at getting better. We know that we are all getting ready for that hinge moment, the one person, event, or moment that will make all the difference in our lives. We just don't know when that is coming. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it, man.
So before we delve into today's topic, Rob, can you talk to us about how you've, obviously, that journey from the humble beginnings to where you wanted to become a sports psychologist?
Sure. Well, again, I played sports my entire life, every sport. I excelled probably in soccer and baseball. And I was just, I was a real streaky player, and no one could really ever help me out. So, if I was playing well, things were great. But if I was playing bad, if I was off, I was just horrible. So there was no middle ground, and no one could ever help me out. And then when I would start playing bad, I would just start thinking too much. I would just get stuck inside my own head, and no one could ever help me out. And then, so when I went to college, an interesting thing happened was there was these Reebok commercials called Dan and Dave commercials on who was going to win the gold medal for the U.S. in decathlon. And Reebok, it was a great idea by Reebok because nobody pays attention to decathlon. Well, it was either going to be Dave Johnson or Dan O'Brien. And I remember following these ads, and before they went to the Olympics, we had this little formality called Olympic trials. And Dan O'Brien was on world record pace, obviously going to make the team, but he was like, who's going to win gold medal? He's on world record pace in Olympic trials. It comes up against the pole vault and misses 3 times. And he goes from first to last, doesn't make the team. Reebok pulls the commercials. And I just remember, I was like, wow, how does that happen? I don't understand. And I cut that article out in the Washington Post that day, and then I started following his career. And he started seeing somebody that helped him out with his routine, with refocusing. And I was like, wow, there's a job for that. That's what I want to do. And so at that moment, that was a hinge moment for me. That was when I knew, look, sports psychology is a route I want to go in. And then when I got hurt in college, I took that psychology class. That was it. And then Dan O'Brien went on to win the gold medal 4 years later. And it's funny because I ran into him, I still have that saved, that article, and showed it to him. He thought he got a kick out of it. It was pretty funny. But that's how I got into it, man. And then, it was absolutely my passion from every morning when I wake up to when I go to sleep. It's never left. It's been a blessing, man, because I just live out my passion.
But I think you raised a good one there, Rob, in terms of what do you think it's the mindset that those individuals have, be it to do the decathlon or, say, from the women's perspective, the heptathlon, what possesses them, and also obviously the mental fortitude that goes with it, to want to put their body through kind of those tough times, and obviously they're doing those events over 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is that their psyche to wanting to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be spot on with it, I'm not quite sure. That's I just think with the best competitors, there is that passion, there is that part that they just love doing what they do. And from that, I think their desire to compete and their desire, like you said at the beginning, to be the best at getting better, how good can they become? I think they love challenging themselves. And that's what I see, I think, with all athletes, is they love that challenge.
I definitely agree with that. It's push. I think somebody raised a good question to me. I think it was last week, but it's come up this week in terms of reaching for perfection. It's like, well, it's impossible, because if you want to get to, I don't know, say the coin the term 100%, well, be it life or sport, that bar is going to move. So you can never actually attain perfection.
Right. Your best, the better you get, your best increases. So yeah, absolutely. That's why I always say, like, we're just trying to focus on the process. We're just trying to be better today than what we were yesterday. How do we get to be the best at getting better? I just like saying that one because, well, to be the best at getting better is all process focused. It's all, can we be better? Can we be better today than what we were, this morning, what we were yesterday?
But do you think in society we over, what's the word I want? Emphasize on, say, the result?
For sure. Yeah. No, no question. I think that's where, ultimately the mental game goes wrong, is when we start focusing on the outcome one way or another. What if, or, and just thinking about the future. And when we start focusing on results, there's a lot of fear in there. There's a lot of, because we don't know. And if we can always just get back to the process, one possession at a time, one shot at a time, that's what we're trying to do. Now the sexy term is mindfulness, that's fine, but it's just being in the moment. It's just focusing on the task at hand, and, not playing out the what if game.
But we talked about a good one off air about, obviously, with young kids nowadays, not being able to, not overcome adversity, but not being able to best to deal with it. And we were kind of saying, well, shouldn't they look at, obviously with psychology, we look at more so developing that skill at, say, high school level or maybe early 20s. But should we not look to give the kids the skills to implement it, I don't know, in elementary school straight off the bat? Yeah,
and thinking about that, I just think it's a cultural issue. I think we've got to coach the coaches on that piece. Because and it depends on the age, right? But it's like, at what age do we really start emphasizing, winning and losing? When does that become more important than getting better? When does that become more important? And at the youth level, look, winning's great, man. We love to win, and it's great, and that should be the goal. But are we getting better in the process, or are we sacrificing our development just for this win? And that's where I look, we got to coach the coaches a lot of times on these mental skills, to one possession at a time. All right, we lost. What did we learn from it? How are we setting our goals? How do we build confidence? We run into a lot of athletes that just don't have confidence, and boy, they're fantastic athletes. It just blows my mind a lot of times. Like, you're really good. Why wouldn't you be confident? Well, that's because they've always had that doubt that's been put in their head, from when they were young. And I think a lot of those skills can really be implemented, when kids are young.
And Rob, when you say confidence, do you mean in a sporting context or outside of that sporting theater and terms like that?
Yeah, well, that's a good part. It's probably a little bit of both, but even in the sporting context, for sure.
But you would think, and I'll use the example as me now, I'm very much, I'm a little bit more extroverted now than say I was, say, 5 years ago. But if I was in my sporting element, you would say, well, James, you're not introverted one bit. It's like, well, you're confident, you are well-spoken, you were kind of have all the tools that you need to succeed in sport. But it's like, well, I'm in my element. I'm in my, so to speak, comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I don't dispute it. I agree with you. The confidence outside of sport, a lot of times I think it just comes on, our life experience, and do we have experience outside of sport as well? The only thing we know is just the one thing. Then that's definitely going to be the area that we're confident in, more so outside of sport.
But to kind of come back to your point, Rob, was saying people are not confident even in that sporting element.
Yeah.
Is it coming back to the coaching giving them, and you could say berating them to some extent, with negative feedback, negative commenting all the time?
Well, not necessarily. I think maybe that's part of it, but I think it's just getting back to it's just results focus. I'm only as good as my last game. Where, we can look at the process may have been great. Like you took 3 shots, they were all on goal. Right? None of them scored. Okay, well, what do you control here? And a lot of times then what's been conditioned is since they've been a young age, if you don't score, then it obviously was a bad game. That's not true. And that's the part where the coaches really have to emphasize process over product. If we can emphasize process over product, then I think that, they allow themselves a little bit more wiggle room on the bad games. They kind of looked at, hey, what did they like? What did they do well? Or what did they learn? And what's in their control? And if we just become all about winning and losing, all about did I score or not, man, then we are only as good as our last performance. And then the confidence is going to be that roller coaster, really up and really down.
But you also raise a good point there. If it's all about scoring, if you're looking at, say, positional gameplay, well, defenders are going to be out of position as well. I was thinking, if I don't have a good game, I've got to go the other side of the field to score. And obviously you don't put the ball in the net, you're now out of position, and the other team, I won't say in all likelihood, but there is a strong chance you have a goal scored against you, and you could be berated for that. Well, why weren't you in your position?
Yeah. I was obviously thinking about strikers and attacking middies. Yeah. But yeah, same thing, man. Confidence, right?
Well, you could say in all modern day sport now, it's as if nobody wants to play defense. It's you be it with if you use soccer as probably an example with the wing backs. Generally, when the opposition scores, they're out of position.
That's so accurate, man. I'm not going to deny that. It's so true. Big part.
But do you think it comes back to that onus of the result over the process in early days, or do you think it comes back to the individual maybe wanting to showcase, this is what other attributes I can bring to the team more so than?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's exactly it. Not, because defense should all get rewarded and all should be emphasized as the clean sheet, right? Like that should be the main thing. It shouldn't be focused on anything else other than that. And if we get in the habit of, putting the emphasis on other things, then it takes away from the most important thing. That's just a clean sheet, man.
Well, that good quote, it goes back to it. Defense wins championships.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's trying to, I'd say, maybe modern sports have somewhat gone against that for maybe entertainment purposes. But it's like, well, be it whatever sport you're playing at, if you can keep the opposition down to less, you don't need to have score as many points.
Yeah. And again, being a great defender is a different mindset, I think, than offense as well. A great defender. Being a defender myself, I always love it. It's the one thing I know is like great defenders never ask, "Hey, was that my man?" or was that my ball? They never ask that stuff. Great defenders are just focused on, as a unit and just finding a way. Just absolutely finding a way. And I think that the defensive mindset is just more gritty. There's not a lot of fanfare with it, and they take pride in that stuff.
Would you say it comes down to probably good communication as well? Because you see with a lot of defenses, when things go wrong, it's generally that's number one root cause. Like, well, they're not communicating. That sixes and sevens. What would be not tactically, but within their shape to keep a striker on side and things like that. So, would you say it would come back to more so that than say mental fortitude?
The communication piece, yeah, absolutely. The why I tie it into mental fortitude is because when we are confident, we communicate a lot more. We're not afraid to say something. We're able, I think, to emphasize our leadership qualities. I think we all have. I think if we lose confidence in ourselves a little bit, we'll get real tight-lipped. We're not going to be talking as much. We're stuck on that last play, and instead of really just focused on the next play. So that's the part that I see that happens a lot. But 100% with you, man, the communication breaks down for sure.
But why? But you would think when somebody is quite outspoken and has that leadership role,
yeah,
why would they not internalize, but kind of go within themselves and not be that outspoken person they normally are when they are higher in confidence?
Well, because I think with confidence, then we just kind of look when we are confident. I think it's just a feeling. I just think we feel confident. When we're not confident, I think it just turns into thoughts, and we just start thinking a whole lot more. We start thinking a whole lot more. Now we're a little bit behind. Now we're trying just not to mess up. Now we're not focused on the exact right thing. We're not focused on the right thing. Then the communication, I think, just breaks down.
But could you not say your thinking element of a game should be done in practice, and you should, in a game, not go in the ebbs and flows of it, but kind of use the muscle memory that you've learnt, be it over years and years of practice, and kind of implement more than because if you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, I should do this, I shouldn't do that, I need to do that, you're overcomplicating things at times, and you could put yourself in a sticky predicament, because if you're overcomplicating things, well, whose man is that? And you could possibly have somebody run behind you. It's like, well, that was my man behind me, and because I'm probably trying to multitask too much, I'm not doing the basics right.
Absolutely.
But what could you do to maybe overcome something like that?
The basis of it is really just getting back to, obviously our preparation is going to be big, is not dwelling on mistakes, not worrying about mistakes, and focusing on the next play and just finding a way. It really is. It's so what next play. And that's the mentality you've got to get. Anything else, we're stuck inside our own head, start thinking too much.
But it's quite difficult in terms of, say, a team sport, because you could have it, if we go to the higher echelons of sports, like professional leagues and whatnot, you could have your supporting cast on your back, say other players, management, the crowd. So it's not the easiest thing to probably overcome, or, okay, I've made a mistake now.
What is easier said than done, though? Of course it's harder said than done. What isn't? But that's the part that I think we work on, and then it's all focused on results, like we said, right? Then it's focused on the crowd, contracts, what people think, all that stuff, and it's just all noise. It's absolutely all noise. When our mental game boils down to finding a way, and just this play is the only thing that matters. And that's the part. If we haven't been trained in the process, if we are focused on results, confidence going to ebb and flow.
But Rob, getting your opinion on this question now, obviously with the likes of social media now, you could look at it from a sporting perspective. If you've played badly, it's very much in your face. This person hasn't done this. This is why they lost. But do you think maybe that should be taught to kids coming up? Okay, this is, well, you could say it's a form of criticism, but look at it as it more of in positive light, with it being, what's the word I want to use? Kind of using it to reflect upon it in a good way. Okay, I think if we use the UK and the US media as the example, it's probably the worst press you can have in the world. They'll big you up once you do something bad. Okay, let's take the rug from under you and say berate you in that way.
The one thing I'll say is, and this was a Reggie Jackson quote. He said, "They don't boo nobodies. They don't boo nobodies. So if they're talking about you, you're a somebody. If they're not talking about you at all, it means you haven't done anything to be, worth talking about. So no matter who they're talking about, like, I'm understanding, like, it's always not the best, but it's really just training ourselves on who really matters in our life, what is important and what isn't important. But I always love that one because they don't boo nobodies. If they're talking about you, then you're important.
Well, another good example of that, probably within the media, would be probably LeBron James. He's
any of the best.
He's not one to push his name. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or indifferent. Okay, if you want to talk about me, that's fine.
Yeah, and when it comes to media, I mean, they're all about the drama. They're trying to create drama. Oh my goodness, LeBron James said this about his teammate. Did he really, or is that just they're just trying to create stuff? And there's good drama when it comes to sport, and then there's bad drama when it comes to sport. And the media just tries to. They just try to get on anything. Beautiful part about media is media will get you focused on results because that's the only thing that matters when it comes to media. The interesting thing is if you watch any, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're going to watch Premier League, right? Right when Premier League ends, can they do it again? I mean, it'll be right after they win the championship, right after they are holding up the Super Bowl trophy. They're going to ask them at the very end, do you think they can repeat? They already got them focused on the next season. And it doesn't matter what the sport is. That's what the media's job is, to get them focused on next season. And that's the part I just find humorous when it comes to it. It's like, wow, they just won. Like, you want to focus, can they repeat?
But then I think, Rob, in terms of the athlete's psyche, it's probably a little bit similar because you don't dwell on what's happened. You kind of say, well, this is the end of the championship. Maybe not to that extreme of straight away, but you do move to the next goal, be it, I don't know, Europeans, World Championship, whatever it may be, and you don't look back, because I get asked from time to time, well, what was this championship like, and so on. It's like, well, once it's time to move on to the next one, it's a bit hazy in terms of what it was actually like.
Right, and then all just getting back to the process. All getting back to the process,
Well, it's trying to find those little things those little percentages gains where you can improve, be it looking at, okay, I did this well, how can I do it better? What did I not do? What did I do not quite well? Where can I go back to possibly the basics and fine tune it in practice to make it a strength? And kind of probably as nitty gritty as that, and it's as simple as that. You're trying to find those minute details to get yourself the rostrum, the pedestal, and whatnot.
Interesting thing about sports is, like, especially with those that have won championships, we always remember the losses more than we remember the wins. Always remember the losses, and in some ways, I think that's the sad part about sport is we remember those losses more than we remember how good the wins are. But on the same token, like, I always think that the best are really driven by that hate to lose mentality more than they love to win. And that's the insidious part sometimes about sport is how long do we enjoy that one? That's why, again, it's getting back, man, how much do we love just showing up and just trying to get better at what we're doing? Because that's the real joy.
But does that not come back to people being very much one-dimensional sport-wise nowadays, and very much being taught to, you wouldn't even call it a skill, no, this is how you're going to do it, this is the right way, this is the only way, and they become very much robotic?
I'm not really sure. I don't know. I don't know the answer, man. I'll admit it. I'm not sure.
But then you should be humble both ways. You should roll with the punches. You should be happy when you win. It's probably a good one in terms of, with the NFL season starting.
Yeah, and I think they are. But a lot of times I'll hear relief. That was a relief that we won because it gets built up so much, And yeah, I think there is joy. I just think those that make it, the losses hurt more than the wins feel good.
But do you think that's because it's been ingrained to people that we need to look at the negative side of things more so than the positives?
Again, man, I don't know. I, why does losing hurt worse than winning feels good? Because in some ways, when we are confident, we expect to win, we expect that outcome to happen. And then when it doesn't, it's a real shock to our system a whole lot. Like we actually feel numb and we'll go through no matter what. I mean, at the end of the season, like all athletes, I think, they'll go through a little bit of that depression, because it's over. Whether we won or we lost. Coaches go through that a lot, man. And we've just got to get back to the next season, because they are so ingrained in the process about what they do. There's a real interesting dynamic when it comes to that piece.
Oh, you got to be careful in some instances of getting it straight back into the next season in terms of burnout and things like that and what that can bring.
And that's the part where when we have perspective and our identity isn't wrapped up in a sport, that's the real important piece. The perspective about, when athletes get injured and then they come back and then they appreciate those things a whole lot more than what they did before because we just take things for granted. It's just how our mind works. And then, but I think, we can have our identity outside of sport is a healthy thing.
But then you were talking off air about kids nowadays are becoming, what would be the word you used? Not brainwashed, but kind of led down this path, or you are going to succeed to become a professional athlete. But do you think it's kind of could put people in a downward spiral because it's like, well, my mother told me, my father told me this, my coach said I'm going to achieve this, and they can't deal with adversity because somebody else might say, well, you've been told you're good at this when you're younger, but you're compared to the rest of your peers now.
Right. I mean, that's why I don't think that's a good thing, because then it's all focused on results. And it's just about, at a young age, it's just about enjoying the sport and getting all the benefits out of sport that it provides by itself, not what we're going to get out of it, but, who can we help and how can we see how good we can become?
But isn't it not a little bit of a fine balance between the competitive element and that of participation, and at times it's going to be a little bit of a grey area because you could talk about with the participation side of things, it's probably got to an epidemic because people are, what's the word that you want to use nowadays? But they kind of, what's the word? I can't think of the word to hand, but they think everything, it comes to them easily, but I deserve this because I got a trophy when I was a participant.
The entitlement?
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. What was the angle? I kind of missed the question.
Would it be in a grey area between participation and competitive? Shouldn't we eye on the caution of going more towards participation with that in mind?
One way or another, I mean, the cream always rises to the top. There's some people. I think sport has such a great life building, character building traits inside of it, but sport doesn't build character by itself. Like, it reveals the character. The coaches that are involved have such an impact on these people's lives that, we can see the individuals at a youth level that are going to be playing next level stuff. And we can see those that, they're just not. And how important it is, I think, for a coach to reach both those athletes just at a different level. And just to allow themselves that freedom and that space that no matter where they are, that they just keep challenging themselves to see how good that we can get today. And that's the part that sport and those characteristics and those life skills last way beyond when all sport is going to be over. Because if the whole emphasis is on next level and playing at the next level and what can sport give me and stuff like that, at the end of the day, it's really pretty empty unless we're going to have that coach that helps us learn those skills that are going to last way beyond when sport is over.
Well, I think I was taught a good lesson by sport. It's like, well, and this is, I think, about 15, 16 years old. Obviously, like you say, it's not going to be there forever. So what are you going to put in place to be your next career, whatever it may be, to put in place that you are set up, well, we'll say, for life? And I was taught very much, well, sport can be gone in an instant, be it injury, being dropped from a team, you name it. And it's obviously looking to focus on, be it your education, vocation, whatever it would be. So you are set up on, wow, in all essence, in a different pathway than you maybe have thought. So it's, you could coin it as not putting all your eggs in one basket. I know some people would argue in terms of, say, if we look at the model of, say, high school kids in basketball, bypassing the NCAA if they had the choice to do so for the betterment of their family. That one argument, you could say, well, yes, you do have a leg to stand on, because if they got injured in the pro ranks, they've got a guaranteed contract. But if they get hurt in college ranks, they're gone. They've also lost their their athletic scholarship, so now no longer a university student. So it's very much a difficult one to say, well, yeah, you should focus on your academics, but you can go do that later in life. So it's a fine balance. I would say, probably from personal experience, probably do them both.
Yeah, and when it comes to that, though, I mean, we're talking about 0.001%, that can bypass that and go to professional leagues. I mean, that's, it's just a tough non sequitur, just because, there's just so few people when it comes to that pool,
But I think we touched upon a good point off air about you saying parents are very much, I won't say pushy, but either the coach, the parent, or the child have that disillusion. Oh yeah, I'm going to make it to the pro ranks, and you talk about that percentage is so low. Should they maybe not reflect and say, well, what else could I do? Be it, you could be, I don't know, sports psychologist, but work not as the athlete, but say the support staff, and you still get up to those high heights of sport.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where it's getting back to the love of the sport. There's the stat out now is, and then again, here in the U.S., 34% of parents think their kids can play at the professional level. 34%. And, I just kind of get back to this. I'm like, if parents knew what it took to be a professional athlete, I don't think any of them would sign up. I really don't, because I don't think they understand how much work goes into that at every single level, and how much sacrifice, and how, like you said, how fleeting it can be. They're just one injury away. They just see the Rafa Nadals. They see the Roger Federers. They don't see the person that's ranked 125th in the world, who no one hears of, but man, they're at home 3 weeks out of the year. They're traveling, and all the stuff that goes into that. And then just on the other point, with 34%, somebody's telling them that. They're not just coming up with that on their mind, but we really have no idea, being able to see professional athletes up front, we really have no idea about how good that every single one of them are at the best level. Now you and I see it because we know what that level is, but the general public has no clue. They just think like it's a choice whether to be a pro athlete or not. And you know what? There's a whole lot more that goes in with that. And I've known fantastic athletes that had all the skills, everything with it, but they hated travel. Well, you can't have both, man. They love to be at home, and God bless them, is awesome, but they didn't like travel. It's not going to work.
Oh, I'm on the flip side of that. I love traveling, so it was a
Yeah, man.
bonus. It's as a result of the athletic career, I've seen a little bit more of the globe. So it's like, well, if I have a chance to see a new country and I don't have to pay to do it, it's a
For sure.
bonus.
Absolutely.
But I think you raised a good point in terms of looking at it from what they don't see behind the scenes. I think,
Yeah.
well, most people are probably delusional in terms of the political thing within sport and say, "Oh, it doesn't exist." It's like, oh, that's not true. It's you're on one side of the fence. I was quite lucky as an athlete. I kind of stayed away from it to a certain extent and went under the radar. It's like, well, if I don't need to get involved, I won't. I just carry on to do what I want. Well, to do the training I have to do and get on with it. And you don't rustle any feathers.
Yeah. That's a smart man.
Well, some might argue it's shying away from things, but it's like, well, and I've spoken to one athlete in particular, and he's very much butting heads with the organization, and they were changing the goalposts. It's like, well, that's one reason. That's another. That's why you're having problems. It's very much. I think maybe at best, maybe be somewhere in between to get the best of both worlds, but don't kind of go towards the extreme of confronting it, because it's in most cases with the high echelons of sport, they were athletes once. It's like, well, they know the kind of sacrifices you've got to go through. It's like, well, there's no point pissing them off, so to speak, if you don't have to, because they are probably have that alpha male mindset. It's like, well, oh, you're annoying me. I'm gonna make it as hard. Look, give you another hurdle to overcome, and it's a difficult one in terms of that from a sports perspective. And to come back to kind of the point that you were saying, 34% of people think that they can aspire to it. It's like, well, it's unrealistic, because it's maybe you're overshooting it from we touched upon it. A good one is with me as the example. Very much luck comes to play, being in the right place at the time. Those are very much components that are out of my hand. You have no control over. Okay, I think it's maybe making better from a mindset perspective, athletic perspective, is controlling the controllables, as you probably agreed with. And kind of just using those tools that you can't control. And if you manage to get to the heights that you do, it's going to be because of somebody else as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one gets there alone, man.
Well, it's having that support network around you. I think it's very much to the forefront. I think recently within our media, where people are struggling with mental toughness, you're thinking you're at elite level. Psychologists are very much accessible, and what were they talking about? I think it was what mental fortitude. I was thinking, well, I had that problem. The first people I spoke to was my family. So it's like, well, you'd have thought you'd have that not have that communication barrier with your family to start with if you do have something wrong, because they'd be the first port to call before you got to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think, well, that's probably generalizing to say that's what I would do. You can't say and stereotype it to somebody, and maybe they're not as close, but it's like, well, that's what that support network was there for. I think we were talking about not being able to deal with the what was it, the difficulties with what obviously elite sport brings. You're thinking, there's not that many, but I think it comes maybe back to that stigma with, be it depression and, like the mental health side of things. You're thinking, well, I think sport is probably at the forefront with that, in my opinion, to being able to deal with things, because it's like, well, we constitute it as the difference between winning and losing, so we do probably put onus more on it, like the mental side of sport, than probably the general public do. So you'd have thought, well, if this is a negative side of it, let's try and solve it, because you don't want more and more problems mounting up on yourselves. But it's a difficult one. So my last question for you, Rob, before we wrap up the show.
Okay.
I like to conclude the show with this question. If you had to summarize this entire episode into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
Our episode?
Yep.
Here? So kind of a stream of consciousness sort of thought. I would say, good question. Definitely thought-provoking. I would say thought-provoking, because they had me thinking a lot during even the answers that I was given. So, yeah, thought-provoking.
That's good to hear. So, Rob, once again, thanks for coming on the Mindset Game podcast.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it, man.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, buddy.
And before I forget, I would really appreciate it if you would be so kind as to leave a short written review, as it helps to get the podcast more notoriety, and it would be more visible in future to others, and thus helping more people, which my guests and I are all about. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game podcast.